Rita, James and I earlier spoke to author Roger Simon from America. Well, fantastic news today about the acquittal of Donald Trump. On this show, we always said the impeachment was a farce, and we were not alone. Roger L. Simon is an American novelist and Academy Award-nominated screenwriter, and last week he described the impeachment as a serio-comic oxymoron straight out of the theatre of the absurd. Roger Simon is a very talented writer. As I mentioned, he was formerly the CEO of PJ Media. He's written 10 novels, including the Moses Wine detective series, 7 produced screenplays, and 2 non-fiction books, including the brilliant I Know Best: How Moral Narcissism is Destroying Our Republic, if it hasn't already. Roger Simon joins us now. How are you, mate? How are you doing?
Well, I wish I were there. Well, I sort of wish I were there because, A, it's warmer, but also because the Australian Open, I'm a tennis fanatic, but I gather you can't go anyway because of COVID, so I might as well be here.
Well, Roger, you described the impeachment as a farce, as a theatre of the absurd. Tell us your reaction this morning on the acquittal.
Well, of course, I was relieved, but I'm waiting for the third impeachment. I'm sure that's going to come around. Suppose Trump wins in 2024, comes back, and then the Democrats take the House, they'll impeach him again for picking his nose or breathing or something. You know, it's really kind of, it's funny, but it's really pretty sad.
Exactly. James?
I want to ask what happens now for the Republican Party after Trump's presidency, and who are the politicians you think are out there that we should be watching? I've been having an awful lot of looks at Ron DeSantis in Florida. Is he the governor of Florida? He's been very strong on his pandemic response. He's been very strong on big tech. Are people like him, are they all waiting in the wings to take over the Trump legacy for the Republicans going forward?
Well, DeSantis is the guy that everybody's talking about, and good reason. And he's very smart, and I think he is better at being Trump, maybe in some ways, than Trump. Yeah. I mean, Trump has a tremendously charismatic thing about him that attracts a lot of people, but also repels a lot of people. DeSantis has all that, but I think he's a little bit more acceptable, a little bit cleverer in not creating big problems, although he's got tremendous guts. I mean, he ran against the whole trend in COVID, kept his state open, and guess what? They were just as healthy as everybody else, or unhealthy anyway, whatever it is.
Rita?
Well, upon the acquittal this morning, Donald Trump has released a statement, and it doesn't seem like he's done and dusted. Do you think Trump 2024 is a possibility?
Of course it's a possibility. I think it'll be Trump or someone from the Trump wing of the Republican Party because, the ones that voted against Trump, the Republicans that voted guilty in this farcical impeachment, were mostly people who don't expect to run for office again. It's over. I mean, American politics is very polarized now. I'm sure everybody in Australia already knows that, and that's just the way it is. And it's going to get more polarized in the next few years. It's a very strange situation, and I'm not a young guy, and I've never seen anything like this in the United States. Even the 60s was not like this.
Roger, you coined the phrase moral narcissism in your book, I Know Best. And moral narcissism is your way of explaining Trump derangement syndrome and explaining the behavior of the left today. Can you just talk us briefly through that idea?
Yeah. Well, the quick version of it is the split between what people say is the right thing to do and the results of what they're saying. The result, to the moral narcissist, the results are completely unimportant. It's what you say that makes you a good person. So what you have in the left of the United States is an epidemic of moral narcissism, of people making pronouncement about the world, the way the world should be. And on the other end, the opposite thing happens, but they don't care because in truth, that's not important to them. It's only defining themselves as especially good and moral people. And therefore, they get to be part of the elite in the United States, or our own American version of the old Russian nomenclatura.
Yes. Rita.
Do you think the Biden administration is going to be moderate, or do you see them as fairly radical in the policies they're going to implement over the next 4 years? And what will that do to America?
I'm afraid they're trying to be very radical, and it's going to create even more. One of the big lies that Biden told and tells himself, probably because he's not the brightest fellow, is that he's a unifying figure and all of that. What he does is just the opposite. I mean, this whole thing about the Keystone Pipeline, putting the kibosh on that and sending all those people out of work when, all these alternative energy systems aren't even ready, is an example of that. I think the man is just going to be a puppet of the left. He's afraid of the left, and he's not too bright. So you kind of a very bad cocktail there. The future is not exciting.
James.
I want to ask about that morally narcissistic elite, though. How is it that we wound up in the U.S. and I think to a certain extent here in Australia, where this so-called elite has now wound up become so in bed with China? You've written about this in the past, and I was wondering if you could walk us through a bit of how this whole phenomenon has occurred.
Well, I think, you have to connect that a lot with big tech. I think it's, if you roll back about, I guess it must have been 4 or 5 years now, Google was said to have been working with China to start a search engine for the Chinese that would include the usual amount of censorship that the People's Republic requires, as we all know. So, I mean, it's these big companies that want to enrich themselves via China, and of course, Biden was involved with it in a kind of pathetic way, but they're all, even Apple, all of them, they all have their footprints there. Although Apple has retreated slightly because they're made fun of because of this. If they weren't made fun of or attacked because of it, they'd still be there. And they all want to make money off of China, and they don't really care about the dictatorship. They don't care about the torture. They don't care about Xinjiang province. They just close their eyes to all that because, the famous remark by the dead American journalist H.L. Mencken, when somebody says it's not about the money, it's about the money.
Fantastic. Roger L. Simon, thanks so much for coming on Outsiders on this very important morning. You're also a huge tennis fan, and your book, The GOAT, I urge people to read as well, the greatest of all time. Roger L. Simon, thanks so much for coming on.